book in front of a student does not mean they all of a sudden have a better sense of self and they're able to creatively express, right? As with any discipline, it's up to that educator, it's up to the instructor to really make that something that's purposeful and an intentional part of what you're doing. I think arts education lends itself very easily. There are a lot of opportunities to do that in a way that it is sort of already set up for. It's interesting to note, I was recently reading this report that came out about arts and SEL, and studying that really very closely, and it points out some of that same thing, but what I didn't ever think about that was pointed out in this report is that part of the reason that that is true is because our minds are already set to think that art is emotional. Art is based on feelings. Art has these, right? So when we're already coming to the table with that as what we think art is, it opens us up to being more susceptible to then creating and implementing some more of those SEL competencies. So the through line is there undoubtedly, but I think the SEL really where it lends itself the most is during the arts practice, not so much, it's the components of doing the thing rather than the thing. So for example, it's not the mural that is a place where you can point to, like, because students created this mural, they've implemented these different aspects of social emotional learning. What would be interesting to note is the process that the students took to create that mural, the process they had to go through, their own understanding of self, their understanding of others. They're dealing with feelings that might come up when they're asked to express about something personal. It is up to the instructor at that point to make sure that that is shepherded in a way where students are gaining those skills intentionally, and that you're aware of the possibilities of potential harm if you're not aware of what could be happening. I'm looking a lot over at you here, Priya, because you know, we've worked together in this way too, and we collaborated on how to make sure that there was more intentionality in your own programming of SEL.
Any thoughts you want to share, Priya, in response to that?
No, I agree with everything Robin said.
Not a plan.
Yeah, but it is something that I think our curriculum is trying to be more intentional about, is having students really reflect on themselves through discussion and other activities outside of the arts, and then engaging in the arts to really process that, and also have a different space to communicate things that you sometimes just don't have words for when you are processing emotions about yourselves and things that happen to you and those sorts of things. And then the product isn't the outcome of them expressing their emotions. The product is actually the empowerment piece, because they know that they've gone through this emotional reflection process, and that allotted them into creating something beautiful for others. And then it becomes an outward thing. You know, it's like, so focusing on these SEL competencies is about self, and then going into the creation process inherently is about community. And that actually changes like their place in the world and, you know, the impact that they can make. And so I think tying SEL and arts actually ends up making it even more powerful for a student. Yeah.
I would say a really beautiful example of that is one of our student supports managers at one of our elementary schools started something called Art Express. And it started because she loved art, and she knew that it was really impactful for her as a young person in order to have this outlet to express the emotions that she had. And so she wanted to offer that in her school, and she identified students. It initially started with students who weren't necessarily the students who would participate in sports, or the students who tended to stay inside during lunch or recess. And so she offered just an open art space, and that was where it started. And then as more and more and more and more students started coming into this intentional space with that she said about teaching them about taking care of the material that they had so that everyone could have access to them, or because we're spending a lot of money and investing into this experience, so we want to make sure that we take care of the products that we're using to create the art that we're having. And then we also want to be respectful of each other in this space and know that it's okay for this person to draw and this person to paint and this person to sketch, and there's room for all of those things to happen in this room and in this space. What she also got to see from that process were students who might have needed a little bit more one-on-one from that. So then it turned into a way for her to also identify students that she could work with separate from Art Express and enroll on her caseload, because they may need a little bit more support and attention. And then a transition in the last 2 years where these students were creating products, and then they have a silent auction at the end of the year, and it really is a huge, like it, when I went in and saw all the art that was around the room, and the students got to choose, what do I wanna sell? And they sell the products to buy more products so that they can create more. So again, it's about building community, that this is, I'm gonna put myself out here, be vulnerable enough to share these things that I created to make money, so that then we can have more students to have an opportunity to create more things. And then things that they just wanted to share, and then pieces that they wanted to keep for themselves. And parents also, then, they wanted to request to have, where's art express space? Because it is this intentional space of teaching these SEL skills in a very structured, intentional way. And it's not just about, here's some paints, here's some pencil and paper. It's about really instructional, intentional teaching around how can I connect to myself, how can I connect to others, and then how can I create a beautiful environment for this world, this school, and how can we do those things together? So.
Wow. One thing that struck me too is there's just the vulnerability aspect. So we talked about Art Express and having that sale, right? And the reality in life is that when I talk to a lot of artists who don't show their work, right? They have, some people, I've been in homes where people have hundreds of pieces of art in their basement that they've been working on for the past 50 years. They die, and it's there. They've never shown anybody. And for a lot of artists, it's terrifying. But I'm thinking about those students whose artwork didn't sell, and sort of what the growing up, or the leadership skills, or the lessons that are learned in that sometimes in life you won't succeed as it may be conventionally defined, right? And how you handle that. And it's okay that I can celebrate someone else's success today in getting their work. So it doesn't mean I'm less valuable or less creative or less interesting because mine didn't sell, but I'm okay with that. I'm still happy about what I created, and I can accept someone else's success. And so I wonder, were there any students who were just kind of like upset or angry that
I didn't see, I'll go back, I'll repeat, like I think that it's that release of my internal experience and just putting it out there in the world, and to have it displayed for people to even see, witness, comment on, and all those things was rewarding for those students. And because they had a collective goal, so it wasn't about just individual pieces selling. It was about us selling these pieces that are on the wall for a specific purpose. And everyone's gonna benefit from all the pieces that move off the wall. And they probably also thought that they have the luxury of, I get to take my own piece. Because there's, again, the internal, like, this is my internal experience out here in the world, and I get to reclaim it again and take it back with me. Or Miss Jessica might put it up on her wall, or the school might, so there's win-win in every direction. And again, that having that shared goal that we are selling these pieces for our collective purposes.
I think what's interesting as a musician, there is a lot of auditions, and there's a lot of rejection. I'm not somebody's got a theater background, but you get used to that fairly quickly. And I do think that it developed some resiliency in me, but that rejection is never easy, and it's not like it got easier as I was going on and on. But I think that's, as I'm trying to think, like, what is the difference between what you're describing and like the audition process is, like, the common goal is not common, right? The goal is, I want to be in this orchestra. I think you're great, but I want to play better than you right now in this moment. So I think through that, though, you learn a lot of these SEL skills in terms of self-management and discipline. The amount of discipline it takes to practice and to recognize that, like, it did take a lot of time. It did take a lot of personal growth to get to that point, even to begin with. But then, you have to manage that. But that's also where I think the notion of the adult, the instructor, the whatever, the developmental relationship that you are creating with a young person, that's where you have that role, is to help shepherd through both those wins and those losses, and recognize, to your point, that this will continue, and that's a hard thing to share with a young person, that, like, this sucks so hard, it's gonna happen so many more overtime, so I'm so sorry. But it's gonna be worth it in the end, and here's how I know that, and here's what I can share with you. But yeah, I think it's both an expression, it's both an vulnerability, and can be, in some cases, a competition, not unlike sports.
Let me ask this question, and then we're going to have another activity. Now that we're all community, there's no shame. It's like Planet Fitness, no judgment zone, right?
That's
So we have
absolutely
activity coming up. But I wanted to, we talk about the arts. Our organization, one of the 4 ways in which we serve schools is the arts. In addition to mental health and physical health and college and career readiness, it's providing these resources often, as was said earlier, in schools that have a hard time funding it. And we're filling that gap. And so I think to the point that Robin made earlier about sort of art being seen as this emotional thing, or that it can easily be seen as a side show, right? It's not the main thing, right? It's not directly math, reading skills, right? And so it often does get underfunded or unfunded. But I think all of us have shared in a variety of ways how the arts have been valuable to us as now professionals, as grown-ups, and how we benefit from having it, whether as youth or even currently. How is it that we aren't marching in the streets, right, demanding that arts be funded more greatly, right, or trying to create more art-based nonprofits to serve you? How have we gotten to this place where the arts are secondary or tertiary and not sort of seen as a normal, regular part of the curriculum?
I can speak to that a bit. I started teaching in 2001, and that was the onset of George W. Bush becoming president and creating No Child Left Behind, and it forced schools to focus on academic growth and academic data, and I think that we started to see the change then. And then, let's see, what was the second thing I was going to say? And then just I don't know if you all saw this, the school that Fame is based off of. Yeah, the School of the Arts, the movie and the show Fame is based off of. The students came together and protested and said they were going to protest at graduation if they did not remove their principal. They removed, and the principal resigned, and the kids were protesting this principal at the School of the Arts because she was just wiping out a lot of their arts, and to focus on academics. I do believe a school can be both and not one or the other. So
Well,
that's
we
all
see
I'll say.
schools, to your point, the school that you recently shepherded somebody else into, schools that prioritize arts education and make that a point to do that, the other things happen, right? I mean, it's not a mistake, it's not an accident, it is absolutely, oftentimes, exactly what a school community needs. And I find it insane that some school personnel still have that notion and this sort of antiquated version of like, arts are the first thing to go, arts are gonna go, we're gonna get rid of the arts. I mean, we're seeing gains in Chicago in arts education, first of all. There are great things happening, we should acknowledge that completely, right? There's a lot of work being done behind the scenes and a lot of work being done on the front lines to make sure that arts are front and center in many ways. I'm gonna do a quick plug for ESSA, because you brought up No Child Left Behind, right? Every Student Succeeds Act is what's happening now, and with a new Board of Education, they are right now, once again, have reopened the process to decide whether or not the arts get a full, weighted, across-the-board indicator in this plan, meaning your school will be evaluated and assessed also on your ability to provide arts education. Right now the indicator is in there, it says arts, but it's weighted at 0, meaning there's no reason for anybody to do anything different than they're doing right now. It's just like, oh, look at the arts, that's cute. So there's some activism to be had here. There's some work to be done. We need to make sure that ISB hears us and says, yes, we hear you, that arts should be a weighted indicator in this plan. It is imperative to the future of our students that we prioritize this not only with our words, but with our dollars. And the way to do that is to make sure that schools are then being evaluated and assessed on it. To your point, when you take that incentive away, it's not that school personnel, nobody once has ever told me like, I don't really like arts education, I don't see it. Nobody says that, right? But then I say, show me your budget, because somebody's saying that, right? So I think that it would behoove all of us to look into that and to do what you can, when you can, with what you can, to make sure that that's front and center, because where the policy happens is where the change can start.
You see athletics as the arts, or being an athlete. One of the things that I was shocked about, I think in high school I discovered that basketball players like Michael Jordan were taking ballet lessons. It just blew my mind. I mean, the connection between that, just didn't imagine it. But what are your thoughts on athletics as arts? So we know many of our students are very interested in athletics as a way to express themselves.
I guess as far as the arts pertains to athletics at that age, it would more so be about expression on the court. We actually did feel like, and you would pick your AAU team or you would pick your college based on, Oregon gets a lot of the top players because they get custom jerseys. Like they use bright colors, they get highlighter type of colors for their green, or they do all this stuff for self-expression. And so you get to express yourself on the court in a way that other schools don't get. My school, Duquesne, is where I went to college at. Duquesne is actually a signature LeBron James school now, because we have LeBron James, the high school coach, as our head coach. So we get custom jerseys, we get custom shoes. And so now all of a sudden you see the quality of athletes going up because they get things that other people don't get. And in your mind, like, you truly believe that the better you dress, the better you play. Like in a sense, like you feel more confident on the court. You get better gear when you walk around campus. Like, it's like that definitely helps. But
The
I think
the Fab Five in 1992.
Exactly, Fab Five definitely shaped culture. It's
long shorts and
then with social media getting the way that it is, it's you are these figures on campus, but you are now these figures online and throughout the community. It's easier to touch alumni bases. It's easier to touch other people within the city, and so yeah, that self-expression becomes more important.
I actually played ball growing up. I take you. No.
I don't know. You got something.
Next time we should do it at the court.
Challenge.
But I grew up as an artist, so it was like a period of time I was trying to get away from being an artist, because that's what I'm always deemed as, like, oh, draw my picture in class, like that. I was that kid, and so I started playing basketball, and I actually felt that there was a lot of connections between playing any sport and the arts, because a lot of that has to do with rhythm and connecting with other people as you're applying this rhythm. The only way that you're good is if you have this balance, to dribble the ball, to analyze the court, to have this flow. And the same type of methodology is needed to make a painting, to make music, to deliver a speech, or whatever it is. And those skill sets really actually enhance my own art, and I don't think a lot of athletes realize that. They're like, oh, I can't come into your classroom, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yes, you can. Because even like how you're thinking about reading each other and how you think about creating your art as an athlete is something that anybody any student can really connect to in terms of creating in general. So I actually have an art and basketball workshop I'm going to be doing. So
to tie into it is
I loved how you brought up earlier the students taking the art and taking their self-expression and creating what I call young entrepreneurs, which I just lit up on. I was like, absolutely. If you're teaching them, my mother actually tells this story as a 50-year-old now that my parents are divorced, that when she would come home from work, I would sit on the porch waiting for her, and I would take rocks and paint them, and I'd try to sell them, and I sold like 3 of them for a nickel. And I was like, look, Ma, you don't have to work anymore. And she tells that story to this day. I'm like, Ma, don't tell me. But I think one of the things that I try to institute, just for the communities, and I think all of us could probably apply this, is how having that entrepreneurial bug can start early if you incorporate just the fact that not where they're profiting off of, like you said, selling their creations, but enabling them then to provide more supplies so that they can do something different, training the different medium, so to speak, and then also just pay it forward.
I was just gonna say, yeah.
Being able to provide those supplies or additional items for other schools or some areas, that may not have it. I'm in the process of creating like a business incubator in the Woodlawn area of Chicago, and I think it's probably paramount to like make that include an arts incubator, a sports incubator. I mean, I think there's a tech incubator. I mean, I think there's so many different ways that it can become a community where everyone kind of feeds off of the pluses or the positives and the negatives, if you will, and then who knows where it can go from there.
Yeah, with Art Express, not every painting sells, and to have that shared goal of whatever we sell off these walls goes back into what we're creating together. I bought a painting and the student was outside and her friends were like, "Oh, you're getting that one? Let's go and get," and they went as a crowd to go and usher her back. It was an experience, and even though their paintings didn't sell, it was our collective paintings sold, and now that's gonna result in something. Yeah.
So there was one more link I wanted to tie into the athletics and arts in a sense. It's the relation of expression of like why. Like as once I got to the Division I level, you're there with pretty much everyone's been the star at that point. Everyone's kind of been praised, and you get hit with this unbearable institution that like you signed 4 years of rights for a 1-year scholarship. The transfer rates are like 50%. It's all of these different things, and it's a job all of a sudden. It's not fun. And everyone had different things driving them for the why. So you see a lot of people, a lot of athletes now, even in the pros who rap or do spoken word, who do some form of art to express their why, and you get all of these emotions as you get to that point. For me, my why was that I knew I couldn't pay for school any other way. And I was good academically, I did all the things that I could, but I couldn't afford $1. Like my parents couldn't afford to pay $1, so I had to get it fully paid for. And that was my why. But some people want to get their family out of bad neighborhoods, or they want to get away from home. Like they just need something. Like everyone has different whys, and so the conversations at that point become expressing your why and finding ways to express your why. And then you get new whys once you get there. So once I got there, we had a school shooting, and the first 2 months, well, as soon as summer school ended, and 5 of my teammates got shot. Several of them didn't get to play a game ever. And so it's these types of stories, and so that's kind of what led to my tech. It was this experience. We also had 23 players transfer in my 3 years of graduating. I got an arthritis condition my senior year, so I didn't play, and I graduated early. But it was all of these things that like no one had a real accurate understanding of that experience until you actually got there and went through it. And so I majored in finance, investment management. I wanted to be a broker because I wanted to help people who were in these financial holes. And what I realized is that they didn't have the money for me to help, but that led to my tech because I knew that I could look back 100 years and get transfer rates, graduation rates. I could measure proximity of home. I could do all of the same things I was doing to put a portfolio together to assess stocks and bonds. I could do that with college athletics, or with picking a city, or picking a school, or picking anything. I took the algorithm from finance and investment management and applied them to a tech and built this engine around it. But that became my why, and those expressions, my tech became my expressions. But other people do it in music, other people do it in writing, and other people do it in so many different ways. But that's a big link between the arts and athletics.
Have started to prioritize like STEM education, kind of focusing on programming and robotics and like Legos and like these sorts of things, like, and I think that the priority then shifts to like skills that can be deemed as lucrative in the future, right? Like these are going to be applicable, and like, people are like, oh, you're not going to make money as an artist, like you're going to make money as a programmer, or you're going to make money as like an engineer. So like focus on like doing these skills that like they don't go to events like these and network with people where they see like it goes hand in hand, like you were talking about. Like these skills they're applicable across the board, and there's so much benefit in the arts, and there's like mean, we see that now too, like kids, they are now going back and they're teaching handwriting because kids don't know how to write, because they don't know how to spell, they don't know how to write, because all of these things are just like not for them, you know, and like cursive is also like an artistic expression of writing, right, and like these sorts of things, so there is a comeback coming to it. People see the importance of that, but I'm saying why I think it's not being pushed as much is because we're like, oh, they're digital natives, and that's what it's going to just continue to increase on, so.
One question I did want to pose is, since it is a diverse group, and everyone kind of has an education background and all this types of stuff. I've always saw this structure of education, especially within college, is it was like job training. Like you learn as a finance major, you learn to be an analyst, or you learn to be an accountant, or you learn to be. It's pretty much job training for a specific job all the way through, and that doesn't work for people like me because you can have the degrees and you don't necessarily get the results, and not just people like me, but just minorities in general. It's not a do this and get this result, and so for me, the arts are even more important because you'll have to create a solution around these barriers in place. And so from a total minority standpoint, from women getting equal pay and all this type, like everyone is kind of navigating through this space, and I think that's kind of a niche to target in a sense because it's that unique experience. You have these barriers to navigate. You have all these things where the arts kind of help you see the picture as it is and draw new ways around it. You can't be trained for a job because the training that you get will fail because you don't get those guaranteed results.
Or the job may not exist.
Or the job may not exist, exactly. So
You have to
that creation standpoint, the innovation standpoint that the arts brings to the table is even more important.
Ready for your question. Do this, we're on the clock, ready?
Breathing out, pushing down towards the ground. Breathing in, arms floating up. And exhale, pushing down. Breathing in, giving yourself a hug. And releasing it out. Breathing in and closing. And releasing. Breathing in, pulling back. Breathing out, pushing back. Breathing in, pushing back. Breathing out.